Okay, so I will quickly introduce Alan, his presentation, Rugs and Carpets of Dagestan. And Alan is a lawyer, educator, and carpet connoisseur based in Yerevan, Armenia, where he teaches law at Yerevan State University. Originally from California, Alan received his BA from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and his law degree from Notre Dame Law School, while he specializes professionally in transnational civil litigation. He is also the owner of an extensive collection of Oriental carpets and possesses an extraordinary, almost encyclopedic knowledge of the history, symbolism, and craftsmanship of Caucasian textiles. Today, he will introduce us to the rich traditions of Dagestani rugs and carpets and the importance as expressions of cultural heritage and historical memory. Alan, welcome and thank you for presenting today.
Yeah, it's a
The
pleasure
floor is yours.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes,
Okay,
we
here we go.
can. And I guess
So yeah,
I'm
going to be presenting briefly on the rugs and carpets of Dagestan, their history, their cultural significance, and just how carpet weaving is done in the area. Let's go. So carpet weaving as a component of material culture and economic activity reflects the characteristics of a people's natural geographical and climatic conditions, the specifics of their traditional economy, and the nature of their social and cultural relationships. Many people viewing Caucasian carpets versus Persian might believe or form an opinion that they're more primitive. In fact, they're actually highly complex and totemic in meaning. All the forms and motifs actually represent things from the distant past. Historically, Dagestani rugs were pretty much lumped together with Azerbaijani weaving. And that's what makes it sometimes difficult to identify the distinctive characteristics of Dagestani carpets. And just generally, as a whole, when you look at Caucasian carpets, there are similarities. For example, if you could compare some of these Dagestani rugs, Lezgin rugs, with Kazakh rugs from further south in the Armenia, Azerbaijani, and Georgian areas, there are reoccurring motifs. But the rugs of Dagestan have their intricacies that shifts them up to the greater Caucasian carpet tradition in the North Caucasus specifically. And I'm just going to talk very briefly about the history of weaving in the area. During the final quarter of the 19th century, interest in carpets as an important element of interior decoration grew in Dagestan. This development was associated with a rise in living standards, new home constructions, urban culture, and increased trade and handicrafts as markets to Russia, Turkey, and Europe opened. During the Russian imperial times, a new aesthetic formed that emphasized vivid colors and rich ornamentation. The carpets became an essential decorative feature in homes and a vital component of a bride's dowry. In Europe, the Oriental carpets were considered a luxury good, and so Dagestan actively participated in the international trade of handicrafts and rugs. In the second half of the 19th century, the Dagestani carpet industry rapidly developed. Commercial centers such as Kuba, Tiflis, which is Tbilisi, Derbent, Shamah, and Istanbul facilitated trade of such rugs to Europe. Kuba is located south of Dagestan and populated by Lezgins and Azerbaijanis. In 1830, for example, 850 carpets and 1,700 flat woven rugs were produced in Kuba. By the end of the 19th century, more than 15,420 carpets were produced. So there was a considerable rise in demand. And most of these carpets, textiles, were woven by Dagestani women. So the expert boom involved both pile rugs and flat woven textiles. I will explain what the differences are soon. And Flat woven textiles consist of kilims, if you guys have heard of kilims, palaces, which are kind of like mats, and sumaks, in addition to textiles you would put on horses. According to the Caucasian Handicraft Committee, which was an association that was formed during the Russian imperial times, in the city of Kuba, locals wove exclusively flat woven rugs. And in Dagestan, flat woven rugs were what was traditionally produced, not pile rugs. They didn't adopt the pile rug technique until international trade required the locals to learn how to do so. Merchants from Azerbaijan played a very big role in the commercial sale of Dagestani carpets. Each spring and autumn, merchants traveled across Dagestan, purchasing carpets and other handicrafts, in addition to arranging future orders. Payment was not only in cash, merchants and artisans bartered for goods, such as raw materials or manufactured goods for carpets. And just a case study, there was an individual, his name was Haji Abdullah Effendi, a native of Dagestan, who opened a carpet factory in Istanbul that had 70 looms, 180 female weavers, and produced around 3,000 to 4,000 square meters of carpet. He employed traditional European, Turkish, Caucasian, and Dagestani motifs, and the females that were weaving at this time in Istanbul were likely local Turkish and other belonged to other ethnic groups. They weren't Dagestani because there wasn't so much migration happening then. After the fall of the imperial Russia, handicraft trade was disrupted until the new economic policy of the USSR was introduced. The Soviet leadership established a carpet department, part of the state trading organization Zak Gostorg in Tbilisi in 1924. And I apologize, my pronunciation is not very good for some of the Russian terms. I'm very weak in Russian. This institution was responsible for international trade of Caucasian rugs. They also preserved and standardized traditional carpet designs by drawing upon the earlier Caucasian Handcraft Committee's work. It's very interesting. This department published books of patterns, which then became molds for the Soviet factories to produce. And some of these villages also learned from these publications how to perpetuate and produce carpets. So they did actually play a very big role in proliferating Caucasian rugs during the early Soviet period. Zakostorg had the monopoly to trade carpets with Europe. Individuals were not allowed because it was the Soviet Union, obviously. And it also purchased carpets from private collectors and from the Dagestan Handcraft Union before exporting them abroad. This organization, Zakostorg, set up trade centers in Cuba, Shamach, and other towns in northern Azerbaijan. And these became essentially watering holes for local weavers to learn of these designs, which I just said in those publications. By the 1930s, carpet cooperatives became major suppliers of export goods. Dagestan was also ranked a leading producer of carpets. In 1934, about 9,000 square meters of carpets from Dagestan were exported to the West. In the same year, a special decree was issued by the Council of People's Commissars of the USSR on the development of the carpet industry in Dagestan, ASSR, demonstrating the weaving industry's importance. Very interestingly, since carpets were valuable export goods, weavers received scarce foodstuffs and manufactured consumer goods as compensation to encourage them to produce more rugs, more high-quality rugs. So they would get things that others would not be able to from the Soviet authorities. Weavers would receive awards such as those from Orstasal, Arkit, and then Verkhne. I'm sorry, again, my pronunciation is not very good. Cooperatives in 1934, the Golhozes. Post-World War II, changes in the carpet industry occurred, such as switching over to synthetic chemical dyes. And that's a problem that persisted in the Soviet Union. They could not get the natural dye quantities back to pre-World War II levels. In the 60s, the Soviet government relaxed rules on private handicraft trade, so many women were allowed to produce carpets independently. This led to a weekly carpet bazaar being formed near Derbent Fortress. And despite the USSR's efforts to revitalize the carpet industry, indirect evidence demonstrates that such exports remained below the levels achieved before the Russian Revolution. And following the Soviet Union and today, the carpet industry in Dagestan has deteriorated dramatically. Many Dagestani traders would buy handmade carpets from the Middle East and export them instead of local fare. Large quantities of imported rugs from Russia, machine-made, replaced locally made carpets, and modern global trends also influenced local interior design. So many people aren't using carpets like they used to, like hanging them on the walls as decorative pieces or as dowries. Today, not many local weavers are left to remain economically competitive, especially with rugs coming in from Asia. But some innovation is occurring today in certain villages and by certain families. So now let's talk about the kind of rugs, now that I gave a brief primer on the history of Dagestani weaving. Flat woven rugs are pileless textiles created by interlacing horizontal and vertical threads on a loom. Because they're woven flat rather than knotted with upright fibers, they're lightweight, thin, and versatile. They're not fuzzy, they're relatively very flat, they're smooth and have a lower profile surface. They're reversible, but not all. So both sides, especially on quilims, are the same on both sides. On the sumac rugs, they're a little different. I'll get to that in a bit. They're also very durable because they have a tight weave so they can handle heavy foot traffic, and they don't need to be cleaned as much because they're flatter. They're usually used for covers, for sifting, sometimes flour, and as wall hangings. Pile rugs are what we usually see, the thicker ones. A shag rug would be a form of pile rug. There are visible tufts of yarn on the rug's surface. And predominantly, these rugs are all made with wool. Their foundation, though, usually cotton. So here we go. The Dagestani carpets, all the different ethnic groups have their own form of carpet weaving. Kind of makes the entire area a rich tapestry in itself. Lezgins usually produce flat woven sumac carpets. Village of Mikrop has pile carpets. Akhti, again, pile carpets, and Kuba type pile carpets as well. Locks have patterned felt carpets. I'm not going to talk too much about them. And large woven palaces, which I was just saying earlier, they're like mats. Kumiks do patterned cut work felt carpets known as arbabash. And there are other kind of, and you can tell from here, everyone has a different form. I'm going to read them all out. But tabasarans are very, very reputable in their mastery of weavings. And I'll get to them in a bit too. So most of the weaving was historically concentrated in southern Dagestan. Many of the famous centers are populated by ethnic Lezgins. Most of them are low pile, like I said, flat. And the ornamentation on these carpets, the motifs, are usually representations of tools, household objects, human figures, plants, and animals. And on the side here, just like a little example of how these looms are built. Here on the left is a carpet loom. It's usually square. And then on the right here, there are weft strings, which are the warp strings are the ones that are long. They go vertically across the loom. And then you have weft strings where you actually start the weaving process. So the materials used, semi-coarse wool obtained from spring shearing. This wool is washed after the shearing and converted into yarn, then dyed. And this type of wool from this age, this spring shearing wool, is preferred because the fibers are stronger and longer and have greater elasticity, better suited for the pile. Natural dyes, many different kind of plants are used. The dominant color of Dagestani rugs are red, and that's obtained from madder root and sometimes cochineal. But cochineal is more infamous in the Armenian highlands. There are protected areas here for cochineal in the Arat Valley. Because of the Russian demand for red textiles during the imperial time and post early Soviet era, there were industrial scale madder farms, but not anymore. Black dye you would get from walnut bark and other plants. Brown dye, walnut leaves, bark, and other plants, sometimes plums. And when you look at the carpets and you see white wool, these are usually undyed yarn. Mordants were used to bind the colors, and very time-consuming and labor-consuming process done primarily by women. So here are the type of knots. We got the Turkish knot or the symmetric knot and the asymmetric knot. These are just for your reference. So here we are at the carpet designs. These are what I was talking about earlier. These are the standardized publications of local North Caucasian designs that are perpetuated. This top one is a Tabasaran rug. These are as well. This is, and you can see these are all very unique, different designs that have been standardized. So one of the more infamous carpet varieties is the Lesgi star. The star itself, the original meaning is to be found in antiquity when stars were worshipped as goddesses of light. And and that's how you can identify whether a rug is from the Lesgian people. Although in Azerbaijan, it's also a very common design as well. Rugs are sometimes hard to distinguish, and it can get political when you label them, depending on what tribe it's from. It could be a little complicated. So here's a runner. Tabasaran carpets. So the best wool in Russia comes from this region, and the natives of Tabasaran are said to be the only ethnicity that continue traditional rug weaving in their homes. In the past, the rugs were not as ornate as today, since they fulfilled a utilitarian and not decorative function. Some of the rug styles were also influenced by industrially printed European and Russian designs. So if you look here on the right, on the bottom here, in these four textiles, these are 19th century female shawls. And because of the demand from Europe for Oriental carpets, these motifs were actually used in the carpets above. So these carpets were inspired by these shawls. And you see a lot of interplay there between European, Middle Eastern, Caucasian, Russian designs. They all kind of find a common ground on the floor or, on a rug. And this pattern, it's very interesting because it changes names depending on which village you visit. And there's a little bit, I've read articles about these conflicting names and how it can potentially start issues. These are flat weave rugs. You usually get these kind of patterns. The one here on the bottom right, that's a sumac rug. I'll get into that in a bit. Here's a sumac. As you can see, it's flat. I try to get a good picture, pull a good picture off the internet. The pile, you can't see it. It's very flat. And on the back side, it's kind of messy. It's not a completed rug on the back. That's all the strands and threads are hanging loose. For example, another flat woven rug is the kilim. As you can see, it's flat and both sides are the same. That's how the ones primarily produced in Dagestan were these sumac varieties. Kilims are more, again, Southern, Turkish, Armenian, Azerbaijani, Persian, Kurdish. Those are the groups that predominantly make kilims. And here we got some other carpet examples. Dagestan was also very well known for their prayer rugs, and I'll get into those in a little bit as well. So here we got a 19th century piece from Dagestan. The strands here, the beige ones, they're undyed wool, beige wool. And we got a flower here, a flower design. Yeah, it's a floral field. And there's a lot of meaning to these different motifs. They can represent protection, fertility, prosperity, tribal identity. You'll see a lot of repeating diamonds, stars, medallions, and borders. Here's a prayer rug, which is interesting. This area around this this protrusion over here, that is called a mihrab, and it typically denotes a chamber of a mosque that indicates where Mecca is. And in the center here, this interesting little square box with triangles, that's the centerpiece where you're supposed to bow. That's where you go and start the prayer. Here's another interesting rug. This one is a Derbent rug. And again, early 20th century. This little design over here represents a crab. That's how you usually denote these shapes in the carpet trade. And these are crab-like features. And then on the sides here, if you look at the border, and the border in the carpet world also has a very interesting name. It's a metaheel. Over here, there are trees of life on in the brown border, the central border, the middle one. Again, some other examples of carpets. As you can see, there's a lot of variety, and that really demonstrates the interplay of cultural transfusion. Over here on the left, you got more of a bote style, which is very common in Iran. Here with the deer, you can see that a lot in Azerbaijan, Karabakh, and in Armenia. You got this kind of motif. Again, a tree of life and pomegranates. The other ones over here, there's sumaks. More here as well. So when you see it like this, it's probably with the repetitive flower field. These are pretty common for Dagestani carpets. Here are some Lezgin prayer rugs and star rugs. As you can see, here are the stars that I was talking about a little earlier. And they're stylistically a little bit more vibrant. And another feature that sets the Lezgin rugs apart is their use of green dye. A lot of the rugs have a little green in them. More prayer rugs from Dagestan. Each have a central point, like I was talking about, right here on the top, underneath the dome. And of course, birds, flowers, animals, humanoid features, characters, diamonds, they all have their specific meanings. And that's it. That's my little presentation brief on Caucasian carpets. Thank you.